So you've got this incredible moment. The Israelites just crossed the Red Sea. And what's the first thing they do? They don't just, catch their breath. They sing. And we're not just talking about any old victory song. This song, right there in Exodus 15, is one of the oldest poems in the entire Bible. And it's huge because it sets up these massive themes, salvation, power, what it means to be in a relationship with God, that you're going to see pop up again and again, all the way to the very end.
And when I say all the way to the end, I mean that literally. Fast forward to the book of Revelation, to the ultimate final victory, and guess what they're singing? Yep, the Song of Moses. So that's the big question, right? What is it about this song, this ancient anthem, that makes it so important, so foundational, that it's still being sung at the end of time? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into.
All right, so the song kicks off with this total game changer in how the people of Israel see things. You got to remember, for generations, they've been hearing these stories, right? The God of our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was history. It was lore. But now, something's completely flipped. They've gone from just hearing the stories to living in one. They've experienced God for themselves firsthand. And if you look at the words here, you might think the important ones are, strength or salvation. And yeah, those are big. But the real mind-blowing part, it's hidden in the smallest words on the page, my and he. These little pronouns, they're not just grammar. They're pointing to a massive internal shift that's just happened.
Think about it. It's not the strength or the God of our father's strength. It's my strength. That is the language of personal ownership. All of a sudden, God isn't some historical figure or abstract concept anymore. He's a real, right here, right now reality, a source of power in their lives.
And then there's this, my song. I love this part. This isn't just them following a script or performing some kind of ritual. No, this is a gut reaction. It's a response that's so deep, so overwhelming, that just talking about it isn't enough. You know that feeling when words fail? It has to come out as a song. And it all leads to this incredible declaration. He is my God. This is the final piece of the puzzle. That whole personal shift just clicks into place. Because of what God has done, these people are completely transformed. They're not on the sidelines anymore, just watching history unfold. They've been pulled onto the field. They're active players in a real, personal relationship with Him. Okay, let's jump into the second stanza, because the song keeps building. So first, it established this new personal connection, right? My God. Now, the camera kind of zooms out. The focus shifts from the internal to the external, and it becomes this epic description of the raw, unmatched, absolutely overwhelming power of the God they can now call their own. And what's so brilliant here is the contrast the song sets up. Look at it. On one side, you have all of God's actions. You hurled, you blew. God is the only one doing anything. And then on the other side, the Egyptian army is totally passive. They are just on the receiving end of all this power. The sea covers them. They're consumed. They sink like lead. This wasn't a battle. It was total annihilation. And this all builds to the core takeaway of this whole section. The song asks, who among the gods is like you? And of course, that's a rhetorical question. The answer is a resounding nobody. See, this isn't about trying to prove that Yahweh is just, a little stronger than the Egyptian gods. The point is that He's in a completely different league. He's not just another god on the list. He's in a category all by Himself.
So now, the song takes another really interesting pivot. It's been looking back at this amazing victory at the sea, but now it starts looking forward into the future. And it starts to answer a really important question. Why? Why did God do all this? What was the whole point of this unbelievable rescue? And the answer hinges on one of the most powerful, most important words in the entire Old Testament, hesed. Now, this is one of those words that's almost impossible to translate with just one English word. It's not just love or mercy or kindness. It's this deep, loyal, covenant-keeping, passionate commitment that a superior shows to an inferior, especially when they totally don't deserve it. This is what's driving everything God does.
And just to give you an idea of how big a deal this is, the word hesed shows up more than 250 times in the Old Testament, and most of the time it's being used to describe God's own character. So His actions aren't random, they flow directly from this steadfast, loyal love. So where is all of this hesed-fueled rescue heading? What's the final destination? Well, it's not just about getting to a specific spot on a map. Look at the language the song uses. He's bringing them to His dwelling, His sanctuary. This is huge. The whole point of the Exodus wasn't just about freedom from slavery in Egypt. It was about freedom for a relationship.
freedom to be brought into God's very presence, to live with Him.
But, and this is a big but, right after this epic song, this incredible high point of faith and worship, the story takes a sharp and, honestly, a very, very human turn. The party's over, the celebration ends, and the harsh reality of what's next, well, it sets in almost instantly.
The contrast here is just staggering. I mean, get this, it's been only 3 days. 3 days since they watched the most powerful army on the planet get swallowed by the sea. And now, they're in the desert, they're thirsty, and they immediately start grumbling against Moses. That triumphant anthem, it's gone, and it's been replaced by a bitter, cynical complaint.
And this moment right here, it sets up the next crucial test for their entire journey. They've just seen God's power in a way that is absolutely undeniable. Check. They know He can win a war. But now there's a new question on the table. Can they trust His providence? Can they believe that this all-powerful God actually cares about their small, everyday needs, like finding a drink of water?
And that's a question that, let's be honest, echoes way beyond the Sinai desert. It rings true for us too. They just witnessed the impossible, and yet their very first reaction to the next roadblock isn't faith, it's fear. And it kind of forces us to look in the mirror, doesn't it? To ask ourselves, why is it that even after our own Red Sea moments, after our biggest wins and most incredible breakthroughs, our default setting when the next challenge comes along is so often to forget, to doubt, and to be afraid?